Have you ever wondered if a small act of kindness could completely change your life? What if I told you that giving away an umbrella on a rainy day led to army jeeps blocking my entire street the next morning? It sounds unbelievable, I know. But that's exactly what happened to me last October. Stay with me until the end, because the reason those military vehicles showed up at my doorstep will leave you speechless. This isn't just another story, it's a reminder that sometimes the universe has unexpected ways of repaying kindness. Welcome to Honor Echoes, where we share remarkable stories of veterans and the ripple effects of compassion that connect us all. If you're new here, we uncover the extraordinary moments that happen when civilian lives intersect with military service members. Before I tell you how a simple umbrella changed my life forever, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You'll want to hear more stories like this one, stories that remind us how a single moment of humanity can create waves that return to our shores in the most unexpected ways. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy with dark clouds that promise a downpour any minute. I had just finished my shift at the community library where I work 3 days a week. The forecast had mentioned a slight chance of rain, but looking at those clouds, I knew better. Thankfully, I always kept my trusty navy blue umbrella in my bag, a habit my grandmother had instilled in me since childhood. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, she would say. And on that particular Thursday, I was grateful for her wisdom. I stepped out of the library just as the first fat raindrops began to hit the pavement, creating dark spots that spread and connected like ink blots on paper. I quickly opened my umbrella and stood under the library's awning for a moment, watching as people scurried by. Some prepared with raincoats or umbrellas, others using newspapers, folders, or just their hands in a futile attempt to stay dry. The bus stop was about 2 blocks away, and I had approximately 15 minutes before my bus arrived. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and stepped out into the rain, the patter of droplets on my umbrella creating a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the chaotic splashing of passing cars and hurried footsteps. As I approached the intersection, I noticed him, a man standing at the corner, getting absolutely drenched. He wasn't young, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair plastered to his forehead, and rainwater streaming down his weathered face. His clothes, a simple button-up shirt and khaki pants, were soaked through, clinging to his thin frame. But what struck me most wasn't his appearance, but his expression. He wasn't frantically looking for shelter or trying to cover himself. He just stood there, staring straight ahead, with a quiet dignity that seemed out of place in the midst of a downpour. I'm not typically the kind of person who approaches strangers. Growing up in a small town, my parents had drilled into me the importance of keeping to myself, especially in the city. Mind your business and get where you're going, my father would say. But something about this man's stillness amid the chaos of rain and rushing pedestrians made me pause. Before I could second-guess myself, I found myself changing direction and walking toward him. "Excuse me, sir," I said, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the rain. "Would you like to share my umbrella? Or," I hesitated for just a moment before continuing, "you can take it if you need it. I'm just going to the bus stop, and then straight home." He turned to look at me, and I was immediately struck by his eyes, a piercing blue that seemed to hold both great kindness and profound sadness. For a moment, he didn't speak, and I wondered if perhaps he hadn't heard me over the rain. I was about to repeat myself when he finally spoke. "That's very kind of you, Miss." His voice was deep and had a distinctive cadence that I couldn't quite place, but I wouldn't want to impose. "It's not an imposition at all," I assured him, stepping closer so that my umbrella now covered both of us. "Where are you headed? Maybe we're going in the same direction." He hesitated again before answering. "I'm waiting for someone, actually. They were supposed to meet me here 20 minutes ago." I glanced at my watch. "My bus would be arriving in 10 minutes. "Well, I can wait with you for a bit," I offered. "No sense in both of us getting soaked." He smiled then, a small but genuine smile that transformed his face entirely. "Thank you. That's very kind." We stood in silence for a moment, watching the rain create rivers along the curb. I'm not sure why, but I felt compelled to fill the silence. "I'm Emma, by the way," I said, extending my free hand. He looked at my hand for a moment before taking it in his own. His grip was firm but gentle. "James," he replied simply. "James Whitaker." "Nice to meet you, James," I said, and meant it. There was something about him that felt familiar, though I was certain we'd never met. Perhaps it was just his gentle demeanor. "If you don't mind my asking," I ventured after another moment of silence, "who are you waiting for?" His expression clouded slightly. "My son," he said quietly. "He's in the military, stationed overseas. He was supposed to be on leave, arriving today. We planned to meet here." He trailed off, looking down at his watch. But his flight must have been delayed. My heart went out to him. I could only imagine how disappointing it must be to wait for a reunion only to be left standing in the rain. "I'm sure he'll be here soon," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "Flights get delayed all the time, especially in weather like this." James nodded, but I could see the worry lines deepening around his eyes. "It's been 3 years since I've seen him," he said softly. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, to be exact. The specificity of his count caught me off guard. I thought of my own father, who I saw every Sunday for dinner, without fail. The idea of going years without seeing him was unimaginable. "You must be very proud of him," I said, not knowing what else to say. James's face softened. "More than I can express," he said. "Thomas joined right after college. 4th generation military in our family." He paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. "He's with Special Forces now. Can't tell me much about what he does, of course." I nodded, though I knew very little about military life beyond what I'd seen in movies. My bus would be arriving in 5 minutes now, but somehow, the thought of leaving James alone in the rain felt wrong. "Listen," I said, making a split-second decision. "I want you to take my umbrella." "I insist," I added when he began to protest. "My apartment is just a short bus ride away, and I have others at home." This wasn't entirely true. It was my only umbrella, but the look on his face when he spoke about his son made the small lie worth it. "I couldn't possibly," he began, but I interrupted him. "Please," I said, pressing the handle into his hand. "Consider it a thank you." His brow furrowed. "A thank you? For what?" I smiled. "For your family's service. For the sacrifices you've all made." I glanced at my watch again. I really should run if I'm going to catch my bus. "I hope your son arrives soon, James." Before he could protest further, I gave his hand a quick squeeze, then turned and hurried toward the bus stop, the rain immediately soaking through my light jacket and sending a chill down my spine. As I jogged away, I heard him call after me, "Wait, how can I return it to you?" I turned briefly, walking backward for a moment. "Pay it forward." I called back, then turned and continued toward the bus stop, breaking into a run as I saw my bus approaching in the distance. I made it just in time, dripping water all over the floor as I paid my fare and found a seat near the back. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window and could still make out James's figure at the corner, my navy blue umbrella now held above his head. I smiled to myself, feeling that peculiar warmth that comes from helping a stranger. It wasn't a big gesture, just an umbrella, but the gratitude in his eyes had made the rainy walk to the bus more than worth it. By the time I reached my apartment, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but my clothes were thoroughly soaked. I changed immediately, made myself a cup of hot tea, and thought no more about the encounter. It was just one of those fleeting connections that happen in cities' everyday brief moments of humanity amid the anonymous rush of urban life. That evening passed like any other. I made a simple dinner, called my sister to catch up, watched an episode of my favorite show, and went to bed early with a book. The rain continued through the night, its gentle patter against my window lulling me to sleep. I woke the next morning to unusual sounds coming from outside. Living on a quiet residential street, I was accustomed to the occasional car passing by. But this was different, a low, rumbling engine noise that seemed to idle rather than move on. Curious, I went to my window and pulled back the curtain. What I saw made me freeze in place, my hands still gripping the fabric. Military vehicles, 3 olive green Jeeps, and what looked like a transport truck were parked along my street. Men in uniform moved with purpose between the vehicles, speaking into radios and consulting clipboards. One of them, a tall figure with captain's bars on his shoulder, was standing directly in front of my building, looking up at the windows as if trying to determine which apartment he needed. My first thought was completely irrational. They've come for me because I took the bus without paying the full fare. It was a momentary panic that made no sense. I had paid my fare correctly, and even if I hadn't, the military certainly wouldn't get involved in such a minor infraction. My second thought was more reasonable but equally alarming. Something terrible has happened. An evacuation, perhaps. A national emergency. I quickly grabbed my phone to check the news, but there were no alerts, no breaking stories about local emergencies. Just as I was about to call my sister to see if she knew what was happening, there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp raps that sent my heart racing. For a ridiculous moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But the curtain movement had surely given me away. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A uniformed soldier stood outside, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. With shaking hands, I unlatched the chain and opened the door just enough to peek out. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. The soldier gave a short nod. "Ma'am, are you Emma Mitchell?" The fact that he knew my name sent another wave of panic through me. "Yes," I managed to say, "that's me. Ma'am, Captain Thomas Whitaker would like to speak with you, if you have a moment." Thomas Whitaker. The name registered immediately. James's son? The one he had been waiting for in the rain? Yes, of course, I said, confusion now replacing fear. "But how did you find me, and why would he want to speak with me?" The soldier maintained his professional demeanor. "If you'd like to come downstairs, ma'am, the captain can explain everything." Still bewildered, I grabbed my keys and a light sweater, then followed the soldier down the 3 flights of stairs, to the building's entrance. With each step, my mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened to James? Was this some elaborate thank you for the umbrella? None of it made sense. When we stepped outside, I immediately spotted him, a tall man in his 30s, with the same piercing blue eyes as his father, standing beside one of the Jeeps. Despite never having seen him before, I knew instantly that this was Thomas Whitaker. The family resemblance was striking. As I approached, he turned to face me, and I noticed that he was holding my navy blue umbrella. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the same cadence as his father's. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "Of course," I replied automatically, still trying to process the situation. "But I don't understand. How did you find me, and why are there military vehicles on my street?" He smiled then, a warm smile that transformed his serious face much like it had his father's. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. The vehicles are part of a convoy. We're heading to Fort Benning for a training exercise. As for how I found you..." He paused, gesturing to the umbrella. "My father told me about your kindness yesterday, but he realized he had no way to return this to you." I shook my head, still confused. "But that doesn't explain how you found my address." Thomas's expression turned slightly sheepish. "That's where things get a bit complicated. You see, when my father described you and mentioned you worked at the local library, one of my team recognized the description. Specialist Rivera's sister apparently checks out books from you regularly." I blinked, trying to process this information. "Wait, so one of your soldiers has a sister who goes to my library, and she recognized me from a description? Small world, isn't it?" Thomas said with a slight shrug. "Once we had your name, finding your address wasn't difficult. Military intelligence has its resources." I wasn't sure whether to be impressed or concerned that the US military had used its intelligence resources to track me down over an umbrella. "That's quite thorough," I said diplomatically. Thomas laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the air around us. "I admit it's a bit much for an umbrella. But that's not the only reason I wanted to find you." He handed the umbrella back to me, which I took automatically. My father told me what you said to him about thanking our family for our service, about the sacrifices we've made. His expression grew more serious. What you couldn't have known is that yesterday was a difficult anniversary for our family. 10 years ago yesterday, we lost my older brother, Michael, in Afghanistan. My heart sank. I'm so sorry, I said, meaning it deeply. Thomas nodded in acknowledgement. My father goes to that corner every year on the anniversary. It's where he last hugged Michael before his final deployment. Dad stands there for exactly 43 minutes, the length of their last conversation. I felt a lump forming in my throat as I thought of James standing stoically in the rain, commemorating his lost son while waiting for his living one. He wasn't actually waiting for me, Thomas continued softly. I wasn't supposed to be back until next week. But after he told me about your kindness, how you shared your umbrella and then insisted he keep it, I pulled some strings to come home early. Your small act of compassion meant the world to him on one of his hardest days. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I had no idea, I whispered. Of course you didn't, Thomas said gently. But that's what makes it all the more meaningful. You didn't know his story. You just saw someone who needed help and acted with compassion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My father and I wanted to thank you properly. This belonged to my brother. He opened the box to reveal a simple silver pendant in the shape of an umbrella, with a small blue stone set in its handle. Michael was a collector of symbols, Thomas explained. He believed that everyday objects could hold profound meaning. The umbrella was one of his favorites, a symbol of protection and shelter. I stared at the pendant, speechless. It was beautiful in its simplicity, but the significance behind it was overwhelming. I can't accept this, I finally managed to say. It's too personal, too valuable to your family. Thomas shook his head firmly. That's exactly why we want you to have it. Michael believed that symbols gained power when shared with others who would understand their meaning. He held the box out to me. Please, it would honor his memory and mean a great deal to my father and me. With trembling hands, I accepted the box. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll treasure it. Thomas smiled. My father also asked me to invite you to dinner this Sunday. He's an excellent cook, makes the best pot roast in the state. No pressure, of course, but we'd be honored if you'd join us. The invitation caught me by surprise, but I found myself nodding before I'd even fully processed it. I'd like that very much. Excellent, Thomas said, looking genuinely pleased. He pulled out a card and handed it to me. Here's my father's address and phone number. Dinner's at 6, but he said to come by any time after 4 if you'd like to hear some of his stories. Fair warning, once he starts talking about his Navy days, it's hard to get him to stop. I laughed, feeling the emotional tension begin to ease. I'll keep that in mind. Thomas glanced at his watch and straightened. I should get back to my unit. We need to be at Fort Benning by noon. He extended his hand. It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma Mitchell. Thank you again for your kindness to my father. I shook his hand, struck again by how similar his grip was to James's, firm, but gentle. The pleasure was mine, Captain Whitaker. He gave me a final nod before turning and walking back to his men, calling out orders with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to leadership. I stood there for a moment, watching as the soldiers climbed into their vehicles. Thomas raised a hand in farewell as the convoy started up and began to pull away, the rumble of engines gradually fading as they disappeared around the corner. Looking down, I opened the box again and ran my finger gently over the silver umbrella pendant. Such a simple object, an everyday item designed to keep rain at bay, yet now imbued with profound meaning. As I walked back into my apartment building, the navy blue umbrella in one hand and the silver pendant in the other, I couldn't help but marvel at how one small gesture on a rainy afternoon had led to this moment. I had given an umbrella to a stranger and received far more in return. A connection, a story, an invitation, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways we could never imagine. That Sunday, I went to dinner at James Whitaker's house. It was the first of many Sunday dinners I would share with him and often with Thomas, when he was home on leave. James did indeed tell endless stories about his Navy days, and I listened to every one with genuine interest. Over time, he shared stories about Michael too, not just how he died, but how he lived, his laughter, his collection of meaningful objects, his belief that symbols could bridge the gap between strangers and make them family. The silver umbrella pendant became my most treasured possession. I wore it every day as a reminder that protection can come in many forms, and that sometimes, the most meaningful connections begin with the simplest acts of humanity. And that's how a simple umbrella changed my life forever. Sometimes the smallest gestures of kindness can create connections that transform our lives in ways we never imagined. I'd love to hear about your unexpected encounters in the comments below. Has a random act of kindness ever led to something extraordinary in your life? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Honor Echoes for more powerful stories of veterans and the unexpected ways their lives touch ours. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples through the world.